My very special guest today on the Red Couch is Brigadier General Dr. Andrew Harewood, and he is a Barbadian. I met him just a few days ago at a function, and he's leaving Barbados shortly and agreed, miraculously for me, to come here on the Red Couch on a Whit Monday and to share with me a little bit of his story. Well, the first part of the story is that, Andrew, you are a Barbadian.
Absolutely. I was born right here in St. Michael. Well, not right here in St. Michael. I was born in St. Michael, and spent quite a few of my first years here. Went to St. John's Boys School.
I did too, by the way. Probably long before you, but way before you. But anyhow,
And I've often, quite frankly, shared with a lot of my mentees that every single thing that I am now is germination started right here. The discipline, the being able to look at things through a different prism and not giving up started right here.
When did you migrate?
So I migrated in my late teens, and the year.
So you went to secondary school here?
I did. I also went to the Seventh Adventist secondary school there in Dalkeith, at least for a short while before heading out. So was here long enough to get a good sense of
a good Bajan grounding.
Yes, to the point when I come back, there are certain foods that some I probably shouldn't even eat.
Such as?
But, well, for the purposes of this interview, I would say definitely, a turnover.
A turnover, yeah.
I love turnovers, of course, fish cakes. And in terms of beverages, passion fruit. There's no place on the planet, and I've tried, because passion fruit is grown in different places, but no one makes passion fruit like Barbadians.
Like Barbadians.
Or sorrel.
Oh, sorrel,
like Trinidadians try, but Barbadians.
Well, my Trini friends may not agree with you, but anyhow. So when you left Barbados and you migrated, do you have siblings or close family here?
I do. So there are 9 of us.
It's a big family.
Big family. 6 boys. Well, 7 boys and 2 girls. 6 brothers. Yeah. And both my sisters are overseas. I do have 2 brothers who are still here. One, he just came back. He was in Texas, but he's now back here. But then I had one. I really have one who he's never migrated. He would come. He would visit. He would shop. He would do the other things, but. As he puts it, quote, I love the rock.
Well, that's been me, because mine also from a large family of 8, and I was the only one who didn't migrate, and everybody went to New York, and I said, see ya, you'll be back, and they come back frequently, and I go visit and so on, so when you went to the U.S., was it that you were taken there? Essentially, the family migrated, right? That's pretty much what I'm guessing.
So a bit of both. So my mother, she migrated, my sisters, and I did have the option to visit, come back, which for a short while, but then ultimately I went. So it was voluntary, and haven't really regretted it. What was
your focus when you went?
So initially when I went, school-wise, was really in building engineering. All right, that I had a love for that, still do, but then I also had a love for behavioral science and law. All right, so ultimately when I went,
that's a big difference.
Huge difference. But although to watch the behavior, in a courtroom setting, and then watch how we work in the behavioral science space, there's some good cooperation there. So my very first degree was in theology and counseling psychology, and I did a minor in pre-law, but then went on and did a master's degree in the whole area of theology, and patristics, the early study of the church fathers. So it's been it was good, but again, germination started right here.
Well, that Caribbean foundation, that discipline that we all grew up with, a St. Giles Boys School. I have fond memories of St. Giles Boys School. It prepared me for secondary school at, Combermere, where I stayed briefly before going to a Catholic school, because being Catholic, my mother wanted all of us to have a Catholic education, and I have no regrets, about that. But there's something about that Barbadian upbringing, where there's the extended family. It's not just your parents or your mother or father, because some of us were raised by single parents, but there's usually been that extended family, the grandparents, the aunts, or even the community.
Village.
Yeah, the village. They say it takes a village to raise a child, and in the context of Barbados, that was a real lived experience. You could not speak to somebody, and by the time you got home, there was probably somebody waiting to interview you.
You must have lived in my house. Yes, yes.
You see, I lived in a similar household.
Yeah. No, and I think you've unearthed a very significant variable for me, because even as a young captain, when the war started, I'm kind of fast forwarding, but when the war started and I found myself, right in the heart of Central Command, and now having to be dealing with all these different nations, I never really had a challenge, even in graduate school, where a lot of my friends and colleagues, had some anxiety around dealing with different cultures and different people. I never really had that, and I know for a fact that was because of what was instilled in me here. I can still remember the teacher that most impacted my life from St. Giles Boys School. Her name was Miss Riley. Miss Riley. When I came back, I asked, for her. Of course, they told me she had passed. But I mean, she was so dedicated. She was so disciplined. There was almost like an aura about her when she entered into the classroom. And she wasn't that tall. She was about maybe 5'2", 5. But there was just something about her that commanded a level of respect. People like that, people like those, have influenced my life and still continue to do so, even as I talk to others. Well,
that grounding, that Caribbean grounding, is certainly something that has lasted for many people throughout their lives. In my mother's home, we were Catholic and devout Catholics, and I if I don't make it to church a Sunday morning, I feel a sense of guilt that I've done something wrong, because you couldn't be in Muriel's home on a Sunday and not go to church,
right.
And you couldn't talk about the beach or anything else before church, or before Sunday school. So, and I became an acolyte for many reasons, but I enjoyed the whole form of the Mass. I knew the Mass in Latin by heart. And so when I finally visited Italy and I went to Mass and the Mass was being said in Latin, I was able to follow it very easily. And I remember Farida, my wife, saying to me, how did you, I said, because it came right back to me,
Right.
So things like that, but that grounding of church, of discipline, of order and structure, of having chores and that kind of stuff and so on. Some people would define it differently, but we Caribbean people saw that as a blessing rather than a curse.
And it was, and I think for me, one of my fears, quite frankly, is that this generation isn't getting some of that same kind of I don't know what adjective to use.
That oxygen, yes,
There was an ethic that individuals from that generation brought to the process.
Down to things like your shoes and how your uniform was tucked in and that kind of stuff and so on. You had to show your fingernails. I mean, things like that.
I'm laughing. I'm laughing because, there was something that we call kiwi polish. And we had 2 pairs of shoes. 2. All right, there was one for school and one for church. And you dare not think about wearing the ones to church, to school.
To school.
I mean, you could, but when you get home, there'll be a conversation.
There'll be a conversation
with a little bit of motivation. You know, but no, there was, and I share this with you know with my family, and again with you know young mentees of mine. You know that there are times when I think perhaps one of the detriments that we may have done to our children is that because we know how we struggled, and so we say, I don't want you to struggle the way we struggled, and so we overcompensate by giving them things that, quite frankly, we shouldn't give them yet. And as a result, there is something that wasn't transmitted, that was lost in the transmission.
Absolutely,
you know?
absolutely. Something you on your Facebook, something you sent me, shared with me, and was a statement from your grandfather that you said you always kept. Yes, and I asked you to share that with our viewers now.
So essentially, my grandfather, who really played a significant influence in my life, in our lives, quite frankly. There was a saying that he used to share with my older brothers and sisters, but of course I was there, so I grabbed hold of it as well. And that is that, you know, today is yesterday's tomorrow. What you plan today is what's going to happen. So essentially what he's trying to get us to understand is that planning is not an option, because you're saying today what you want to do tomorrow. But you've got to also, if you flip the script, tomorrow is what you really planned yesterday. All right? And I'm grateful for thoughts like those, because now, as you know, where the Lord has blessed me to go, when I think about statements from people like Peter Drucker, who's one of the world's greatest, you know, leadership thought leaders over the past 100 years, quite frankly. You know, where essentially he says, you know, nothing is less productive than to make more efficient what should not be done at all. Nothing is less. As leaders, as strategic leaders, especially as senior leaders, whether it's a country, whether it's a Fortune 500 organization, but there are times when you have to be able to figure out, as the leader, we don't need to do that anymore, because we just need to get rid of it and build from the beginning. And so my grandfather's thought to me, in terms of knowing what I want to do for tomorrow, I have to plan that today, because tomorrow is going to be yesterday. All right. And there are a lot of witticisms that that my grandfather had, my mother had, and they didn't have college education.
But there were ways.
Extremely.
You know, an academic qualification doesn't define wisdom. You know, wisdom. Some of the smartest people I know never went to, you know, had that the benefit of that college education. I wanted to pivot a little bit now to your career, both in the ministry and in the military. To have achieved the rank of Brigadier General must be something very special. And even as you prepare to exit, I want you to share a little bit about that journey, because you know, for me, one of the things I enjoy about these programs and these interviews is that I get a chance to show people, young people hopefully, who may watch, that you can dare to dream, and that your circumstance or where you are at the moment or where you're from doesn't define where you will be or where you can get to be. And to show them that many before you have built the blocks and the steps, starting from very, very humble beginnings at a base that is very, very low, but yet managed to overcome that and to progress and to ultimately achieve success. And I wanted you to share that part of your story with us.
Well, first of all, thank you for that. I mean, that's very kind of you. And for me, it's very humbling when I was promoted in December of 20, and there was some Barbadian representation there as well. So that was very, very that was very humbling, and I deeply appreciated it. Knowing that you are not alone in any major thrust of your life becomes very important. Knowing that you don't have to figure everything out alone by yourself is also very important. And so I think all along on my journey, I've always had individuals that I could reach back to and ask significant questions. Who were teachers, who were mentors, who were coaches. That's number one. Number two, realizing that my rank is not about me. My rank is about the 1 million people that I have to make sure their lives are better. The 15 or 1600 active duty chaplains spread across 200 countries, that they're taking care of their commanders. Making sure that when I'm called to prepare, or my staff is to prepare a briefing, that ultimately is going to be viewed by the Chief of Staff of the Army, Secretary of Defense, or even the President or Commander-in-Chief, that everything is aligned. Again, going back to one of your earlier questions, those details, the germination of making sure that those details, that started here. And so I've always tried very hard to make sure that people are clear. I am a Barbadian who happens to be an American citizen. In fact, the coin that's going to be used, the commission coin that's going to be used for my retirement, on the other side of the coin is the Barbados, the map of Barbados in the aqua water. I'll make sure you have one of them.
I would be honored.
And so on one side it has all the American stuff, my rank, and on the other side it has a simple phrase: direction is more important than speed. And it sits right on the map of Barbados, as it sits in the aqua ocean of the Caribbean Sea. And so for me, what it was like is that I always had that sense that my life does not belong to me. My brand does not belong to me. My leadership gifts does not belong to me. And it is very humbling, because once I recognize that, then I am forced to realize that there's a stewardship ethic that every morning when I get up, I have to make sure I manage. I do not have the luxury to be cavalier with my words. I do not have the luxury to be cavalier with my actions. Because I have power, whatever that means, I'm very clear that there's always someone else who will always have more power than I do. As I often tell some of my mentees when we're having these sessions, everyone in the Army has a boss. I have a boss, he's the chief. He's the chief. The chief, he's got a boss, Secretary of Defense. He's got a boss, the President of the United States. He's got a boss, Congress. They have a boss, the people. All right. The Constitution is beautifully written, whereby we are clear that we don't have the luxury to just do what we want to do nilly-willy, as we say. So for me, having some good mentors, some good coaches, but then also having a supportive family. They did a piece on me recently where, when they asked the question, what's the one regret? And it's that, there's so many birthdays I've missed. I mean, at one point I was gone for 13 months and 2 days. And I lived with the certainty of death for that time period. Missed birthdays, anniversaries, all kind of significant events I could never get back. All right. And so knowing that sacrifice was for something bigger than me, greater than me, it gives me some semblance of joy. Some. But regrets, I have two choices. I can cry over the regrets or realize that it is what it is, But it's been very, very humbling. It's been very, very humbling to have been in this particular position.
Family life?
Family life, wife, physician type, sons, 4 of them, and then a whole bunch of other adopted sons and daughters that we've either helped through school But again, that same thing that I experienced in my home, while I had a large family, there were people that grew up in my home that I only realized that they weren't family when I got older, and they told me, well, that's really not your cousin. That's really not your... But they were always there, if that makes any sense.
It does. I have similar experiences, so I'm smiling because of that.
They were always there.
Yeah.
And we parent the way we parented. And so for me now, as I transition to this next season of life, looking at the Caribbean region, Barbados in particular, Trinidad, Jamaica, any assistance that I can bring in helping young people, like you've alluded to let them know, look, don't look at yourself through the lens of where you are. Look at yourself through the lens of where you can be. Because the reality is, it is never too late to become the person that you could have been. Never. All right? It's
never too late to become
the person
that you could have been. Right.
Never.
I think that's something worth remembering, because I hear people say, oh, I wish I had done this. And I'm saying, well, but what's holding you back?
Yeah.
I mean, Colonel Sanders, when I think he opened his first KFC
over
at
60.
age 60-something, 60-something years old, when people are looking to get into that digressive stage, he was now beginning his career. So
it's about a mindset.
It's about mindset.
It's about a mindset.
Yeah. We're here with Brigadier General Dr. Andrew Harewood. As you come to the end of this phase of your career, I know this is probably the beginning of new stuff and other stuff. So I'm going to ask you briefly if you could share what you can at this stage, when you get past June the 28th, is it?
28th of June.
28th of June, when you leave the U.S. military after a stellar career, and as a proud Barbadian and U.S. citizen. What is next for you, Dr. Harewood, Brigadier General?
So they are to say that they aren't individuals who are trying to influence me in one direction would not be honest. With the level of clearance I have, obviously there are companies that would love for me just to come and sit on their boards. I think where I'm leaning heavily is in two areas. So there's a nonprofit that I started years ago. We do a lot of leadership development around the globe, and called MOHIM, and I will be focusing on that. I'll still cheer that organization. But then also there's a consulting company that I also founded, and so working with Fortune 500 companies, governments, large organizations in the area of strategic planning, systems analysis, conflict resolution, anything in the area of leadership and leadership development is where I feel that my passion will actually land. But for me, as I was sharing with one of my sons, Andrew, namesake, it doesn't matter for me at this point. I think I've seen pretty much whatever I want to see. It's about spending time with people one-on-one, and again reminding them, look, it is not too late to become the person you could have been. How can I help you get to that point? Because the reality is, most of us, when we look at the problem sets that we have, when we look at what individuals might view as the big challenges, we also have the solutions. And sometimes it just takes courage. It takes courage to recognize that you have to lead yourself, because nothing in this world, especially in organizations, will happen by itself. To use another Drucker quote, he says only three things happens naturally in organizations, only three: friction, confusion, and underperformance. Everything else requires leadership, everything. Which means in any organization, even if it's a home organization or a country organization, if those three things aren't happening, which those three things will happen by themselves, leadership must be intentional. And I think very often what I see in organizations, some of my clients, is they confuse management with leadership. two different paradigms. Yeah. So what I'll be doing is really trying to hone the skill of helping people in a different paradigm. Don't see myself actually going back to a church, because I think that in the evolvement of where we are as a globe, at times the church, through the lens of denomination, can become more of and I'll just say it, can become more of a distraction, that we lose sight of the humanity of people. Whether we're dealing with issues we have to keep the main thing, that people are important, whether they're black, whether they're white, whether they're straight, whether they're gay, whether they're broke, whether they're wealthy, whether they speak the or language. No. Are you a human being? Yes. Okay. Then I have a responsibility to make sure that your life is better. That's where my head is right now, because war, for me, sir, war forged a level of clarity that I don't think any of the educational institutions that I've gone to, have. And I've been blessed to have gone to some pretty good ones. But war, this living with a certainty of death, it forges a level of clarity that you become very, 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 very clear. This is important. This is critical. This is not. All right. Because before you thought everything was critical. It isn't. I don't know if I've answered your question.
You have,
Yeah.
very eloquently.
Yeah.
Brigadier General Dr. Andrew Harewood, I want to thank you, especially on the eve of your return to Washington, for fitting me in a very short notice here on the Red Couch. It's been fascinating. I think we'll have to do a follow-up on another occasion, because
Sure.
there are so many other questions I'd like to ask, but time does not permit on this occasion. But thank you for giving me that snapshot, and for hopefully painting a picture, particularly for our young people, to show them that in this world where there's all this confusion,
They can do it.
there's all the clutter and all the noise and so on,
They can do
that
it.
you can sift through it, and you can find a path. And no matter how humble your beginnings are, there is a seat at the table for
Absolutely.
you. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you very kindly,
thank you.
sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
My very special guest, Barbadian Brigadier General Dr. Andrew Harewood, on the Red Couch today, sharing some of his life stories and some of his plans for the future. For Capital Media, I'm Vic Fernandez.